Hello, and thanks for joining us here at Genesis Bible Church. My name is George Sweat, one of the pastors on staff here, and we're so glad that you decided to join us, whether that's through our website, on YouTube, or listening to an audio version. Well, we are going to be diving into this week's message here in just a few minutes, but before we do that, we want to let you know about an opportunity that we have here at the church for you. We know we've been hearing from a lot of you, and a lot of us are feeling the same way, and that's that we are really missing our church body. But we want to also respect some of the local ordinances and things like that that are in place. And so what we're trying to do is put together some very small groups that would be able to meet, honor some of the social distancing regulations and things like that, but still enable you the opportunity to meet as a small group here at the church. So that would be less than 10 people, keeping social distancing in place and things like that. And just an opportunity to maybe watch the service together, have that time of worship together, and then have a time of discussion afterwards. If that's something that you might be interested in, please reach out to us here at the church. The information is here at the bottom of the screen if you're watching via video, or you can also reach out to us here at the office at 585-596-1119. We'll see what kind of interest we have and see how we can make that happen so that we can honor you in allowing you the opportunity to meet together and have that time to talk about some of the things that we're going through as a church and things like that, and some of the things that may be weighing heavy on your heart, but at the same time also honoring some of the local regulations that are in place as we're trying to slow the spread of the COVID-19. Well, today, as Pastor Mark is going to be jumping into a new series, we're going to be looking at a lot of different ideas that are in the Bible and how that relates to what we're going through today, and also looking at how our faith maybe parallels science, or is it something that we have to choose one or the other? Well, Pastor Mark is going to be challenging us and diving into that very topic in today's message entitled Asking for a Friend. Well, here's Pastor Mark with this week's message.
Hey everyone, we hope you're being blessed. It's our prayer for you is that God is blessing you, that God is working in your heart, your mind, your life, even in this kind of unusual time that we're all in. We're changing gears in our message series. We're starting a new series today called Asking for a Friend. We all have questions, and some of us are really good with we're just out there with our questions. We have no problem asking them. But others of us, maybe we're like, well, how many of you have ever asked a question for a friend? You say, I have a friend who wants to know, but it's really that we want to know. And so we're just going to spend the next couple of weeks going through questions that you may have, or maybe even it is for a friend. But we just want to cover some of those questions that you may have and use our time wisely for that. And the topic that we're going to cover today is faith, science, and the coronavirus. Faith, science, and the coronavirus. And some of you say, well, this isn't a question I have. Well, maybe as we get into it, it may end up pointing to a question you may have, or maybe not a question, but more of a struggle that you've had, or maybe there's been times or moments where you've had to wrestle through these things. And so that's why we're talking about this, because really the question is, do faith and science, do they fit together? Do they fit together, or are they mutually exclusive? Do you have to choose between one or the other? Do you have to leave one behind in order to embrace the other one? Because there are times that we can be pushed into feeling like that we have to choose. And if you're kind of questioning the relevancy of all of this, that's kind of where the coronavirus part comes in. We have all of these scientific experts, doctors, different scientists studying all of this and, saying we have to do this and this and this. And then you kind of hear other people, maybe people more on the faith spectrum are saying, we don't need to know any of that stuff. We just need to trust God. And so maybe we're kind of feeling like we're kind of stuck in this place of, what the scientists are saying, and then, what the faith people are saying, that, we don't need to pay attention to this, we just need to trust God. Do we have to choose? Do we have to choose one or the other? I mean, here's a way to make it really, really practical. It's this. Do you ever felt like, if I wear a mask, am I not trusting God? Maybe you've never thought that. Maybe now, even as I say that, you're kind of like, I never thought of that. But just maybe let that rattle around inside your head for a minute. If I wear a mask, am I not trusting God? Now, some of you is like, oh, that's stupid. I know the answer to that. I mean, you could apply that to anything. You could apply it to seat belts. If you want to go so far, and maybe some people want to carry it that far. I don't know, but we wrestle through all of these things of, what do we believe? And then what we do, how does that affect what we believe? How does all of this fit? So hopefully you see the relevancy of these questions. Because at times it feels like that we have to choose between faith and science.
I'm a little concerned right now about your salvation and stuff. How come you have not been baptized?
Because I never got around to it, okay? I don't know why you always have to be judging me. Because I only believe in science.
But tonight, we are going up against Satan's cavemen. And I just thought it would be a good idea if you... Felicidades.
Well, it feels like we have to choose, and you can see examples of people, like you just saw, that felt like he had to choose between getting baptized and believing in science. And so there are many people, many situations that make us feel like we have to choose. But can I tell you this? The truth is that we don't have to choose. Faith and science are not mutually exclusive. We're going to see through scriptures today that God is actually revealed, that God can be better known by you and me through science. Science isn't something that's against God or God is against science. God is actually revealed through scientific research. Matter of fact, some of the earliest scientists, some of the most scientific findings that have changed our lives actually came from people of faith who enjoyed studying science. So let me start right off with saying that. You don't have to choose. And there's a reason why. Because science points to God and God points to science. Now here's where this starts to get a little murkier, a little sticky. There's a word I want you to know, because this is going to help you so much. It's the word presuppositions. Presuppositions. And the word presupposition means this, that somebody already has their mind made up. They've already made a decision even before. So let's say this. A scientist is sitting there and he's got a presupposition. He's already got his mind made up. Maybe he's an atheist. And I'm not saying that all scientists are atheists. Let's just say the one for this example is an atheist. And so he has a scientific finding, but he's going to interpret that within the confines of his presupposition. And so he's going to interpret what he sees based on that. But in order to have full disclosure here, I do want to tell you this, that scientists, or science people, if you want to say it that way, they are not the only ones who have presuppositions. I have presuppositions. You have presuppositions. We have decisions that we have made before. You and I, we may look at that same exact scientific finding, and because we would identify ourselves as followers of Jesus Christ, we would say, oh, well, I see that. And we may, even with that scientist, we may look at the same thing and come to two different conclusions. So you always have to know that. Whenever, we come across science and scientific findings and other things, you always kind of have to keep in mind, now we don't always know what the presuppositions are, but sometimes if you dig a little deeper, you might be able to find out what it is. But when we only interpret things according to our presuppositions, we kind of fail as we do that. And, in Matthew 22, In Matthew 22, in verse 37, it says this. Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind." We're supposed to have our minds engaged with our faith. You know, some people would say that, to have faith is mindless. That God is just asking for us, if we're going to live by faith, that God is just asking for us to be mindless imps. We're just mindless robots saying, "I worship God, I worship God." That's not at all what God asks. We see here when Jesus is telling this man of what the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. Our minds are meant to be engaged in our faith. We're supposed to be thinking through our faith. We're supposed to be thinking through the integration of our faith into practical life. Some of us, we may fall into the thing where we have faith in parts of our life, but not in other parts of our life. We have the part of our life where we use our brain, and we have the other part of our life where we use our faith. It's not supposed to be that way. That's not the way God has called for you and for me to be. We're supposed to have our minds fully engaged, and that means we study and we wrestle with issues. Over in the Psalms, in Psalm 111 in verse 2 is a great verse talking about God in nature, or God in science. Psalm 111 in verse 2, it says, "The works of God are great, studied by all who have pleasure in them." God's works are great. And it's not just talking about God's miracles. And miracles are a great thing to study, and revivals are a great thing to study. But there's even more than that. And this is really talking about the context of nature, the physical works of God. And it says, studied by all who have pleasure in them. God calls us to be people of study, to be studying nature and science. He wants us to do that, but some people who already have that presupposition that there is no God, they say, "Well, you can't study this because it'll disprove God." God calls us to take up that challenge and to see that in the sciences, to discover God, to see His fingerprints all over nature and science. And it says that we can actually do this and we can have pleasure in it. That we can enjoy having new discoveries or getting to know God in a new and different way, even through creation, through science and nature. And over in Psalm 19, verses 1 and 2, talk about God being revealed, about knowing God in nature. Psalm 19, verses 1 and 2. "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge." It says that God is known. I love this. That the heavens declare the glory of God. That we can look at the sky even and see the glory of God. We can look at nature and all of creation and see the glory of God. We don't have to hide away and cover our eyes from nature. No, God wants us to look wide-eyed at nature and to see His glory revealed. To see God's glory revealed even in science. God doesn't want us to run away from science. He wants us to run to science, to see His wonderful creation. And it says, "And day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge." There's knowledge to be had, and it's not just book knowledge. It's not just degrees and letters after your name knowledge. It's, I think what he's really pointing at here is knowledge of God. Knowledge of God. There's just something to even just study the human eye and how it works, and to know that God created that. He fashioned that. To see a newborn baby, and to think that all of those bodily systems were created and ordained by God. That he fashioned that baby. We don't have to shy away. We don't have to get lost in ignorance. That's not what God's calling us to. God calls us to knowledge, to study, and to knowledge, to know. Because I believe that God calls us to do this because he wants us to know him more. And the more we know about this world, the world around us, the more that we'll actually know about God. Over in Romans chapter 1, in verse 20, Romans chapter 1, in verse 20, such a great, because some of you say, well, I don't want to get a big science book and have to read and, get a microscope or a telescope. I'm not into all that. I love Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. You see, we don't have to have a microscope to see the fingerprints of God in nature, in creation, in science. No, this verse tells us that the invisible attributes of God are clearly seen. You can look at the trees, you can look at the hills, you can look at the clouds, you can look all around at this amazing creation that God has given you and given me. And we can see glimpses of the invisible attributes of God. Visible attributes, the glory of God, the grace of God, the majesty of God, the creativity. When was the last time you thought about that? The creativity of our amazing God. That's where our creativity comes from. Because we're made in the image of God. And so his attributes, these fingerprints of God, these glimpses of God, are clearly seen, understood by the things that are made. If I were to do some artwork, first of all, let me tell you this, it wouldn't be that good. But also, you would get to know something of me by the artwork that I do. There's always something revealed of the artist by the artistry. And when we look at God's artistry in creation, all of the things, it says, the things that are made, we get a glimpse of God. We get a glimpse of the artist as we look at his artistry all around us. You see, there are those who would want to make you feel like you have to choose. They have to choose between faith and science or faith and nature. God actually calls us to do the opposite. Instead of running away from those things, God calls us to run to them. Because God is revealed. He is made known to us through his amazing creation and science and seeing how all of these systems of life fit together. How God made us and put us here in this world. And there's so many things around us that they're made for us. They're made for us to enjoy. They're made to sustain us. They're made to challenge us. And they're made to reveal God. And it says that they are clearly seen. If we would just open our eyes. Maybe for some of us maybe it would call us to check some of our presuppositions. And don't think that we already have the answers and that we already have it all figured out. But that we can receive these things by faith. And what I love about this is our third point of worship, is that when handled correctly, when handled biblically, science actually points us to worship God. Not run from him, but to actually be amazed and worship God. To see that beautiful sunset or that beautiful sunrise would cause us to see that newborn baby, would cause us to worship, to say, wow, God, you are amazing. I can't believe what you have made. I can't believe that this beautiful sunset, God, it's so beautiful. And it's a glimpse of this invisible attribute of your beauty that we don't get to see fully yet. But God, we get a glimpse of it. And God, if that sunset is so beautiful, God, and that's just a glimpse of who you are. I can't wait to see you, God. I can't wait to see your glory. You see, we can actually, if handled correctly, if handled biblically, science, nature, creation is meant to cause us to worship God, to actually worship Him. We have a video now that we want you to check out, and it's some of the top scientists in the country right now. Some great schools of learning, some revered and respected schools of learning. Even there are people of God. There are people who approach science not with fear and trepidation, not with burying their heads in the sands of faith, but they're diving right into the toughest parts of science. And they will talk to you and they will tell you that this is leading them to worship. They're seeing God in their studies, in their research. So you don't have to choose. Check this out.
We are here to talk about big questions. Maybe the biggest question of all, does God exist? I won't give you a proof tonight, but I hope I will give you some things to think about. Things that have led me from being an atheist to becoming a believer and a follower of Jesus.
Perhaps the most widespread fundamental assumption in the intellectual West today is that there is no reality beyond what natural science discovers, and that there is no authority or good higher than the freedom of the individual. Now, both science and individual freedom are good, but followers of Jesus, like me, have a different view. We believe that both the deepest reality and the highest moral meaning, or good, or authority, are to be found in loving relationship.
Why is nature regular? Why does it follow regular laws? Why can we understand them? And we're so used to these ideas today that we don't realize that they weren't actually that obvious to most people through most time. And the reason for that is that if you just live in the natural world, it doesn't seem to be always that regular. It seems to be capricious. It changes itself all the time. And so what you can show, I think quite decisively historically, is that these ideas, these metaphysical underpinnings of science, uniformity, regularity, intelligibility, have deep theological roots. Their roots go back to a long history of theological reflection on a God who is faithful and sustains the world, therefore, in a regular way.
But just simply the idea that the universe could be expanding, not sort of expanding into something, but just that the space-time metric changes and that there could be a beginning of time is just incredible. I mean, if you go back to before Einstein's work and you go to Newtonian world, there's basically a coordinate system. There's X, Y, and Z, and T, right? And these are just fixed, and things happen in this grid, and you describe physical processes and events by putting them in this grid. And the idea that the universe was changing is just completely ludicrous to many people. And then along comes Einstein, and now we realize that space-time not only can expand and contract, but through the work of Hubble, it actually is. The universe is expanding, and so if you play it back, there was a time when the universe was incredibly small and tiny. That to me is just mind-boggling, and it actually adds to my sort of confidence that the creation story has some merit.
I certainly have colleagues who speak very much the way I used to speak. Like, how can you believe in something that you can't, prove mathematically or show in this way? And in fact, a friend of mine who's a mathematician used to say that to me. How can you believe in something that you can't prove? I only believe in things I can prove. And then one day he was reading a history book, and his friend, who happened to be a Christian, said, why are you reading that history book? You can't prove any of that. And he realized there's a lot of truth that has happened in the past that we can't prove today like you can a mathematical thing. And furthermore, of course, all of our science and our math rest upon axioms and things that we take at faith. So people who think that they can't deal with faith are really just deceiving themselves.
So what I'm fond of saying, and I'll say it again tonight, is I don't have the faith to be an atheist. To me, the universe does require an explanation. The philosopher's very ancient question of why is there something rather than nothing is still a valid question. And as many people, including physicist Paul Davies, have pointed out, the laws of physics themselves demand an explanation that stands somehow out of science. Whether that is a physical explanation or a spiritual explanation, nature is not self-explanatory. And ultimately, if I had to tell someone why I am a theist, It is because precisely I think that nature, as we see it, requires an explanation. And the more we know of the world from science, the more it begs that explanation.
I start by saying there is a God who created the universe, and he's not an impersonal God. He has declared himself as a loving God who seeks a relationship with us and also gives us free will to choose him or not. And our purpose then is found in being in relationship with him.
The order and structure of the natural laws, to me, suggests a God who ordained and conceived those laws. The astonishing complexity of living things, to me, suggests an architect who cares about those things. The fact that there is something rather than nothing suggests the existence of a creator of that something. And indeed, one of the joys I have in studying the natural sciences is that I learn a little bit about what God has done. And in the process, I think I come to understand a little bit of what he is like. He is much bigger, much grander, much more awesome, much more majestic than I would have previously imagined.
See, science, it provides a set of tools that are useful for investigating phenomena in the natural world. But as powerful as it may be for dissecting planetary motion and battling cancer, it's not really intended for questions like, why did life forms originate in the first place? And we're free to speculate, opine, and have our beliefs, but science is not equipped to answer questions like this. This doesn't itself mean, let me be clear here, that there is an answer somewhere else. It just means that we have to be faithful to what science is, and that we can't extend the purview of science beyond what it is capable of addressing.
The Lord led me to genetics, and I don't have time to get into that story, but it's a fascinating story. How he led me to genetics. It was not what I had planned to do, but my goodness, I'm so happy I did. I can't imagine myself doing anything else, but I see it all as part of his plan to lead me to that and to help me to see identity in a whole different way. And when I think about my own identity, I think of Christ and how he created us. He created us in his image, so we had identity with him. And then we sinned, and his grace, we talk about grace, his grace, through his grace, he wanted to bring us back in relationship with him and to bring us back in identity with him.
Hopefully you enjoyed that and you saw people that were far, far smarter than me. People with the credentials, people with the experience, who are not choosing. Because the truth is that you don't have to choose. The truth is that you shouldn't choose between faith and science. They actually fit together. They fit beautifully together. And actually, this is to choose would be to miss out on knowledge of God. It would miss out on seeing glimpses of the attributes of God. Because science, without presupposition, actually points to God. So let's do some application here. Let's apply this truth by three questions that we need to ask whenever we come across something that's science or a scientific finding or research, and maybe it looks like it's discrediting God or disproving God. The first question we need to ask is what we're hearing or seeing or what's being told to us, is it really scientific? Or is it somebody's theory? Is it really science, or is it full of presupposition? We have to say that about spiritual things too. We shouldn't blindly swallow spiritual things. Is what we're hearing scientific? Is what we're hearing, is it biblical? Is it spiritual? Or is it even just plain political? I think there's a lot of that going around today too, but I'm not going to go down that path. But the question we ask, is what we're hearing, seeing, is it really science? The second question we can ask is what is my motivation for how I'm wrestling with this? Am I just being selfish and calling it being spiritual? Am I shying away from knowledge and truth? Or am I going to get in there maybe where it's messy and wrestle and study and read and pray and meditate and read things from people smarter than you or me and trust? Believe that every word is established by 2 or 3 witnesses. that wise counsel is a good thing. It's my motivation to glorify God and to know Him more. A third question for us to ask, and the third point is this: am I willing to think? Am I willing to worship God with my mind, as the Great Commandment says? Am I growing in my knowledge of God and God revealed in this world? Am I willing to do that? Am I thinking? And those first 2 points, those first 2 questions really point us to that point of worshiping God with our mind and studying, to think about what I'm hearing and reading, thinking about what I'm hearing and reading in the Bible, think about what my motivations are. I believe that we can look at scientific research and we can be level-headed. We can look for ways that we can receive what we can receive. And we can take that and we can glorify God and we can see God in it. Can I glorify God? I raised the question of the mask in faith. Now, some of you, I know you've been waiting for this whole message to see, is he going to bring that up again, or is he just going to dodge it? I'm not going to dodge it. The question I asked was this: if I wear a mask, am I not living in faith? And I believe that answer, first to give an explanation of my answer, and I'll tell you my answer. I believe that ask the question that way is asked in a choosing type of way. That I have to have one or the other. That I have to choose science or I have to choose faith. And hopefully you get through this message that you don't have to choose. So basically, I just nullified the question. That you can actually do both. You can wear a mask and operate in faith. And I would even say this. How about try this? Wear a mask and speak of God. Wear a mask and share Jesus Christ with another person. Wear a mask and stare and enjoy a sunset or a sunrise. Wear a mask and look at the beautiful hills all around us and glorify God, starting first in your heart and then with your face. You don't have to choose. You just have to choose to worship and glorify God. That's their only choice you have to make. Let's pray. Father, forgive us for believing the lie that we have to choose. That's either science or you, science or faith, science or belief in God, or science or the Bible. God, we have clearly seen through this message, through these scriptures, that God, you point us to creation. You point us to nature and science. Because God, you know that you are known there. God, you know that there is your invisible attributes to be seen there. God, there's knowledge of you that can be discovered there. So God, I thank you for helping us to see the truth with this message, with these scriptures. And God, I pray that as we are bombarded with science, and God, as we're in that place of, do I trust God or do I trust that? God, help us to think, to worship you with our minds, and to look at nature and creation, and to look for your fingerprints, to look for your glory. And God, that we would come away with even a deeper appreciation and worship for how great you are. God, that we would discover you in the smallest of things and even the greatest of glories. God, that we would see you and that we would worship you. In Jesus' name, amen.